Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when power from beyond the stars, power that answers to neither light nor dark, tears through the fabric of space itself? Above Yavin 4's emerald canopy, reality screamed. The Rebel Alliance's sensor arrays went haywire first. Lieutenant Jarrus nearly dropped his calf as alarms shrieked through the command center, displaying readings that made no sense. Not a hyperspace signature, not an asteroid. Something else entirely, a wound in space that bled impossible colors. "Get me a visual," Commander Vanden shouted, but the technicians were already ahead of her. The main screen flickered to life, showing the jungle moon's upper atmosphere. There, suspended in defiance of physics, hung a tear in the universe itself. Crackling energy, golden, pink, colors that had no name, pulsed around its edges. Through the rift, stars that didn't belong to any known system glittered impossibly. Then something fell through. A figure, human-shaped but wreathed in dissipating light, plummeted toward the jungle. In her hand, visible even from orbit, a sword blazed like a captive star. "Scramble rescue teams," Vanden ordered. "And get me General Dodonna. Now." The rebellion had seen many strange things in its fight against the Empire. But as the rift sealed itself with a sound like reality exhaling, leaving only the falling warrior and her impossible weapon, every sensor operator felt the same certainty. Nothing would be the same after this. In the jungle below, Adora hit the ground hard. Pain exploded through her body, different from Etheria's familiar ache, sharper somehow, more real. The sword of protection had absorbed most of the impact, driving deep into the soil beside her, but consciousness was already fading. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was the unfamiliar weight of this planet's air in her lungs and a strange, pervasive energy that seemed to hum through everything. It felt almost like magic, but wrong, ancient and watchful and alive in ways Etheria's magic had never been. When the rebel scout team found her 20 minutes later, Captain Hera Syndulla approached cautiously, blaster drawn. The woman, if she was human, lay unconscious, one hand still reaching toward a sword that pulsed with faint golden light. Her clothing was unlike anything in Imperial or Rebel databases, white and gold, practical but ceremonial, designed for someone who was both warrior and symbol. "She's breathing," reported the team medic, scanning carefully. Humanoid physiology, elevated stress indicators, but stable. No Imperial implants or tracking devices. Hera knelt beside the stranger, noting the unusual height, easily 6 feet even unconscious, and the sense of contained power that radiated from her like heat from a sun. The sword drew her attention next. When she reached for it, curious, one of her Twi'lek security officers grabbed her wrist. "Captain, we don't know what that is. Could be a weapon, could be a bomb." Hera hesitated, then nodded. "Bag it separately. We'll analyze it in the lab." She looked down at the unconscious woman, at the strange red jacket and the expression of exhausted determination even sleep couldn't erase. "Get her to medical, and someone better wake up Mon Mothma. Something tells me this is going to be a very interesting conversation." As they loaded Adora onto a stretcher, none of them noticed the way the jungle itself seemed to lean away from the sword, or how the local fauna had gone completely, unnaturally silent. The Force, ancient and eternal, had felt something it had never encountered before. Power that existed entirely outside its domain, and across the galaxy, in his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, Darth Vader's eyes snapped open behind his mask. Something had changed, something impossible. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The medical bay aboard Home 1 smelled wrong. Adora's nose twitched as consciousness crept back. Antiseptic and recycled air instead of Etheria's flowers and forest scent. Her muscles screamed protest as she tried to move, finding herself in an unfamiliar bed surrounded by equipment that hummed with purposeful technology. But no sword. Panic flooded her system. Adora's eyes snapped open, and she lurched upright despite her body's protests. The medical droid attending her emitted a startled beep and rolled backward, optical sensors flashing alarm colors. "Patient is conscious. Alert medical staff." "Where's my sword?" Adora's voice came out hoarse, desperate. She swung her legs off the bed, ignoring the IV line that tore free from her arm. "Where?" The door hissed open. 3 figures entered. A green-skinned Twi'lek woman with a pilot's confidence, a protocol droid that immediately began fussing about Adora's vitals, and a human woman whose silver hair and composed bearing radiated authority. "Please, sit down," the silver-haired woman said, her voice calm but firm. "You're injured, and we mean you no harm. I am Mon Mothma, leader of the Rebel Alliance. You're safe here." "My sword," Adora repeated, staying on her feet despite the way the room swayed. "I need my sword." Mon Mothma exchanged glances with the Twi'lek. "The weapon you were carrying is in our secure analysis facility. Our technicians are studying it to ensure it poses no threat to—" "They can't touch it." Adora's voice rose, edged with genuine fear. "You don't understand what it is. What it can do if someone tries to—" A distant alarm cut through her words, then another. The ship shuddered slightly, and the medical droid's optical sensors shifted to emergency red. "Security breach in Lab 7, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Unknown energy discharge, evacuating personnel." Mon Mothma's expression remained controlled, but Adora saw the flash of concern. "That's where they took your weapon." "It's not a weapon," Adora said, already moving toward the door despite her weakness. "It's the sword of protection, and it doesn't let anyone else wield it. You need to let me—" "Stand down." The Twi'lek, Captain Syndulla, Adora realized from the insignia, blocked her path, blaster not quite drawn, but hand resting meaningfully on its grip. "You're not going anywhere until we understand what you are and why you fell out of the sky onto our base." Adora met her eyes, seeing the wariness there, the exhaustion of someone who'd fought too long against overwhelming odds. She recognized that look. She'd worn it herself for years. "My name is Adora," she said quietly. "I'm from a planet called Etheria. I don't know how I got here. There was a rift, a tear in space during a battle. One moment I was saving my world, and the next—" She gestured helplessly at the unfamiliar medical bay. Everything was different. Mon Mothma studied her with the calculating gaze of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "And the sword." "It chose me," Adora said simply. "It gives me the power to protect people, to heal, to fight against oppression and tyranny." She paused, then added, "I led a rebellion too, against an empire that conquered worlds and erased cultures. We won, but—" The memory of Horde Prime's final moments, of reality tearing apart, made her voice catch. "The victory cost more than I expected." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Sparks showered from a ceiling panel, and the lights flickered to emergency backup. "Lab 7 is experiencing catastrophic containment failure," the intercom announced with mechanical calm. "Recommend immediate—" "Take me to it," Adora interrupted, looking directly at Mon Mothma. "Please, the sword won't hurt anyone if I'm there, but if it feels threatened, if it thinks I'm in danger—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Another shudder ran through the ship, and distant shouts echoed down the corridor. Mon Mothma made her decision with the speed of someone accustomed to impossible choices. Captain Syndulla, escort her to Lab 7. Keep your weapon ready, but do not fire unless I give explicit authorization. She turned back to Adora, and for just a moment, her controlled expression cracked to show the desperate hope beneath. If you truly fought against an empire and won, Adora of Etheria, then perhaps the Force brought you here for a reason. We could use someone who understands victory. As Adora followed Captain Syndulla through Home One's corridors, she felt it, that strange, pervasive energy she'd sensed when she first arrived. It pulsed through the ship, through the people they passed, through the very air itself. Not magic, but something older, something that watched and waited and judged. Ahead, Lab 7's door sparked and buckled outward, and through the gap, golden light blazed like a star refusing to die. The sword of protection was calling her home. Lab 7 had transformed into a lighthouse of cascading energy. Golden light poured through the buckled doorway, and Adora felt the sword's call vibrating in her bones like a familiar song. Scientists and security personnel huddled behind blast shields, but the energy wasn't attacking. It was searching, desperate and afraid. "Stand back," Captain Syndulla ordered, but Adora was already moving forward. The moment her fingers closed around the sword's hilt, the chaotic energy snapped into focus. Relief flooded through the connection, not her emotion, but the sword's own consciousness recognizing its bearer. The light dimmed to a manageable glow, and the alarms finally went silent. Adora lifted the sword, feeling its weight settle into her palm with perfect familiarity. Except something was different. The power that usually flowed through her like breathing now came with resistance, as if moving through water instead of air. That strange energy, the presence that permeated everything here, was interfering somehow, creating feedback where none should exist. "Fascinating," breathed a Mon Calamari scientist, lowering his protective goggles. "The energy signature is completely unknown. It's not Kyber-based, not plasma, not even midi-chlorian reactive. It's as if the weapon operates on entirely different physical laws." "It's not from here," Adora said quietly, holding the sword close. "Nothing about me is." Captain Syndulla's comlink chirped. "Captain, we have an incoming Imperial Star Destroyer. It just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge." The blood drained from every face in the lab. Mon Mothma's voice came through with forced calm. "How did they find us so quickly? We've maintained radio silence for—" "They're not transmitting standard patrol patterns," the tactical officer interrupted. "They're heading directly for Yavin 4. Ma'am, it's as if they knew exactly where to look." Adora felt cold realization settle in her stomach. The rift. When I came through, it must have been visible from— how far can ships see in space here? "Hyperspace wake would have registered across half the sector," Syndulla said grimly. "If the Empire was monitoring subspace frequencies, they'd have seen it, probably assumed it was some kind of rebel superweapon test." "We need to evacuate." Mon Mothma's voice carried the weight of a decision made 1,000 times before. "Begin emergency protocols. All personnel to their stations." "No." Adora's voice cut through the rising panic. Every head turned toward her. "I didn't come here to run. I didn't survive Horde Prime just to watch another empire hurt people because of me." "You don't understand what you're facing," Syndulla said. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger with her impossible weapon might mean something. A Star Destroyer carries 72 TIE fighters, an entire legion of stormtroopers, and enough firepower to glass this moon. We're a medical frigate and some support ships. We can't fight that. Adora held up the sword of protection, feeling its power pulse in response to her determination. "Then it's a good thing I can." "You're one person," Mon Mothma said, but she was listening. They all were. For the honor of Grayskull. The transformation took her. Golden light exploded outward, and Adora felt her body shift, growing, changing. 8 feet of height, strength enough to move mountains, healing magic thrumming through every cell. She-Ra stood in the ruined laboratory, and for the first time in this new galaxy, she felt complete. But it hurt. The transformation that had always been effortless on Etheria now burned like fire through her veins. That pervasive energy, the force, she somehow knew without knowing how, was fighting the magic, trying to understand something outside its ancient dominion. Her healing factor kicked in immediately, adapting, finding equilibrium between two kinds of power that had never been meant to coexist. She-Ra opened her eyes, and every person in Lab 7 took an involuntary step backward. "By the Force," someone whispered. Captain Syndulla holstered her blaster with a decisive snap. "Well, that's new." "Mon Mothma," She-Ra said, her voice resonant with power that made the deck plates vibrate. "I understand if you don't trust me yet. I'm a stranger who fell out of the sky, and for all you know, I could be an Imperial trick. But I've seen what empires do to people. I was raised by one. I fought one. I won against one." She pointed the sword toward where the Star Destroyer approached, invisible but inevitable. "Let me prove that I'm here to help. Let me show you what I can do." Mon Mothma studied her for a long moment. In the rebel leader's eyes, She-Ra saw the calculation of someone who'd bet everything on hope before and lost pieces of herself each time, but also the recognition that sometimes impossibility was the only card left to play. "Deck Officer Vanson," Mon Mothma said into her comlink, "scramble our fighter complement. Prepare for defensive engagement." She looked directly at She-Ra. "And clear Launch Bay 3. We have an unconventional asset deploying." As alarms blared throughout Home 1, She-Ra felt the ship lurch into motion. Through the walls, through the Force itself, she sensed thousands of lives aboard this vessel. People fighting against impossible odds because they believed freedom was worth dying for. She'd protect them. All of them. The way she'd failed to protect so many on Etheria. The Imperial Star Destroyer would learn what it meant to face a princess of power. The Imperial Star Destroyer. Relentless, hung against the stars like a dagger of cold iron, and Captain Calran watched his tactical display with the confidence of a man who'd crushed dozens of rebel cells. The anomaly that brought him here had dissipated, but something still registered on his sensors. A power source unlike anything in Imperial databases. "Deploy TIE squadrons," he ordered. "Standard search pattern. If the rebels are hiding down there, I want them found and destroyed." On Home 1's bridge, She-Ra stood beside Mon Mothma, ignoring the stares. Even transformed, even radiating power that made nearby equipment flicker, she felt the weight of doubt from every rebel officer present. They'd seen too many heroes die against Imperial firepower. "The TIE fighters are launching," reported the tactical officer. 72 craft. "We have 12 X-Wings, 6 A-Wings, and 4 Y-bombers ready for deployment." "Barely a third of their numbers," muttered a pilot. She-Ra didn't know, fear evident in his voice. "Then we need to be 3 times as effective," She-Ra said simply. She turned to Mon Mothma. "Can I communicate with your pilots? They need to know I'm on their side before I start." She gestured vaguely. "Doing what I do." Mon Mothma nodded to her communications officer. "Patch her through to all rebel fighters. Encrypted channel." The comlink felt strange in She-Ra's oversized hand, but she'd learned to adapt. "Rebel pilots, this is She-Ra. I know you don't know me. I know I look impossible. But I've fought impossible odds before, and so have you. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and let me handle the ones you can't reach." Static crackled. Then a woman's voice came through, professional but underlaid with barely controlled stress. "This is Gold Leader, unknown entity. We appreciate the sentiment, but unless you can fly an X-Wing, you're not going to be much help up." "Launch Bay 3 is opening," interrupted the tactical officer, unable to keep the shock from his voice. "Ma'am, the unknown energy signature is moving fast." She-Ra had already leapt through Home One's atmospheric shield before anyone could stop her. Space was cold and airless, but the sword of protection blazed around her like a shield of living light, creating a field of breathable atmosphere that defied physics and common sense. She'd done this before over Etheria, though never so far from her planet's magic. Here, it cost more. She could feel the drain already, but it would be enough. The TIE fighters saw her immediately. How could they not? A glowing figure floating in the void, sword raised like an ancient warrior goddess, positioned between them and their target. "Unidentified contact," the TIE squadron leader reported, his voice tight with confusion. "Humanoid, no spacecraft, no visible propulsion. Requesting—" She-Ra didn't wait for him to finish. She pushed off hard against nothing, using telekinetic force she'd barely understood on Etheria, but somehow worked here. The sword blazed brighter, and she rocketed toward the leading TIE fighter with speeds that made rebel pilots gasp into their comms. The TIE pilot fired. Green laser blasts converged on her position, and She-Ra brought the sword up, angling its flat blade. The lasers struck the enchanted metal and reflected, scattering back toward their origin. 2 TIE fighters exploded as their own shots struck them, and She-Ra was through their line before they could process what happened. "Did she just—" Gold Leader's voice cracked with disbelief. "She reflected their fire," someone else shouted. "No, that's impossible. Lightsabers don't work that way. They're energy weapons, not—" "Less talking, more flying." She-Ra's voice cut through the tactical channel. She grabbed a TIE fighter's wing as it passed, her grip crushing the solar panel like paper, and hurled it into 2 more approaching craft. The explosion lit up the void like a miniature star. The Imperial pilots broke formation, which was exactly what she wanted. Coordinated fire would overwhelm her defenses, but panic she could use. An X-Wing pilot, call sign Blue 7, found himself pursued by 3 TIE fighters, their laser fire stitching the void around his craft. He pulled a desperate barrel roll, but one of the fighters was already lining up the killing shot. Then She-Ra was there. She'd crossed 100 kilometers of space in seconds, the sword leaving a golden contrail. She grabbed the TIE fighter with both hands, her fingers denting the hull plating, and used it as a bat to swipe the other 2 craft out of the sky. "Thanks," Blue 7 said weakly. "I think." "Any time," She-Ra called back, already moving toward the next threat. The sword felt lighter here in zero gravity, and she was learning to use that. Every swing, every reflected shot, every impossible movement was forcing her to understand this new galaxy's physics, how the Force created a substrate she could push against, how her magic could manipulate its energy even though they came from different sources. It hurt. Every second in space, every transformation sustained, every impossible feat drained her faster than fighting ever had on Etheria. But she'd learned long ago that her pain was worth other people's safety. Aboard the Relentless, Captain Calrin stared at his tactical display with growing horror. His TIE squadrons were scattering, and that thing was destroying them with contemptuous ease. 20 fighters gone already, and the remaining pilots were reporting impossible readings. Deflected energy weapons, physical strength beyond any droid or augmented soldier, speeds that shouldn't be possible without propulsion. "All fighters, fall back to defensive perimeter," he ordered, then switched to ship-wide communications. "Ready primary batteries. Target the anomaly directly." Turbo laser batteries rotated toward She-Ra, their massive barrels tracking her golden glow against the stars. Enough firepower to level a city focused on one warrior. She-Ra, pull back. Mon Mothma's voice came through sharp with urgency. Those batteries will obliterate you. She-Ra looked at the Star Destroyer, at its bristling weapons, at the embodiment of Imperial might and oppression. She thought of the Horde's warships raining fire on innocent villages, of Horde Prime's armada casting shadows across entire worlds. She raised the sword of protection high, and it blazed like a second sun. I really don't think they will. The turbo lasers fired. 12 lances of coherent destruction streaked toward her, each powerful enough to pierce a capital ship's shields. She-Ra swung the sword in a perfect arc, and golden energy exploded outward in a sphere. The turbo laser fire struck her shield and simply stopped, held suspended for one impossible moment by magic that refused to acknowledge physics. Then She-Ra pushed, and the energy reversed. Not reflected cleanly like the TIE fire, but transformed, converted from destructive power into pure light that scattered harmlessly across the void. Silence filled every comm channel. Rebel and Imperial alike stared at what no training had prepared them to witness. Captain Calran found his voice first. "Retreat! Full thrust! Get us out of this system! Now!" As the Relentless turned ponderously away, already charging its hyperdrive, She-Ra floated in the aftermath of battle. Around her, the Rebel fighter pilots were slowly emerging from combat shock, their channels buzzing with disbelief and wonder. "Gold leader to Home 1, said the squadron commander, her voice steadier now. "I don't know what the hell she is, but I think we should keep her." She-Ra smiled, despite her exhaustion, and began the long flight back to the Alliance flagship. Behind her, the Imperial Star Destroyer jumped to hyperspace, carrying with it a report that would reach the Emperor within hours. And in his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, Darth Vader stood, his contemplation ended. Whatever had disturbed the Force was no sensor ghost. It was real, it was powerful, and it fought for the rebellion. The briefing room aboard Home 1 had never been so crowded. Every squadron leader, tactical officer, and senior rebel commander had crammed inside to witness Mon Mothma's debriefing of the woman who'd single-handedly driven off an Imperial Star Destroyer. Adora sat in human form now, the transformation released hours ago. The exhaustion was bone-deep, worse than anything she'd experienced on Etheria. Her muscles ached, and the sword of protection rested against her chair, its glow dimmed to barely visible embers. Around her, rebel officers argued with the passionate intensity of the people who'd forgotten how to hope without examining it first. "We should exploit this advantage immediately," insisted General Dodonna, his weathered face animated with rare excitement. "Strike Imperial supply lines while they're confused. Show them we have a weapon they can't counter." "She's not a weapon," Captain Syndulla interjected sharply. "She's a person, one who nearly collapsed after returning to the ship. A person who saved 22 pilots and prevented a massacre," countered another officer. "We can't ignore what she represents." Adora listened to them debate her future like she wasn't there, and something cold settled in her stomach. She'd heard these arguments before, in Bright Moon's War Council, in the Horde strategy sessions, the calculations of how to use power, how to deploy assets, how to win at any cost. Enough. Mon Mothma's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. Adora is not a weapon to be deployed. She's an ally who has offered her help. The rebel leader turned her measured gaze to Adora. "Which raises the question, what exactly are you offering, and what do you want in return?" Adora met her eyes. "I want to help people. That's all I've ever wanted. The Horde raised me to be a soldier, taught me that conquest was order, and order was peace. I was wrong. They were wrong. She touched the sword's hilt, drawing strength from its presence. I learned that real strength means protecting the vulnerable, not crushing them. If your rebellion fights for freedom, then I'll fight with you. Just like that? Dodonna's skepticism was obvious. You appear from nowhere, demonstrate impossible power, and expect us to simply accept you into our command structure. No, Adora said quietly. I expect you to use me however you need to. Send me on the missions no one else can survive. Point me at Imperial strongholds. I've been a soldier since I was a child. I know how this works. That's exactly the problem. Princess Leia Organa spoke for the first time, her voice carrying authority beyond her years. She'd been watching Adora with sharp intelligence, and now she leaned forward. You're thinking like someone who's been used, not someone who leads. The rebellion doesn't need another soldier willing to die. We need people who understand why we're fighting. The words hit Adora harder than any physical blow. She saw herself at 15, eager to prove herself to Shadow Weaver. At 20, leading Horde battalions without questioning orders. The difference was that she'd learned, changed, grown. But had she? Or did she still default to being pointed at problems like a weapon? There's an Imperial supply depot on Ferrix, Dodonna said, pulling up a holo display. Small garrison, minimal defenses. Standard raid. We go in, steal what we can, destroy the rest. Blue Squadron requested support after their last mission went badly. He looked at Adora. If you're serious about helping, prove you can work with our people instead of for them. Mon Mothma's expression showed disapproval, but she didn't countermand the order. This was a test, Adora realized. They needed to see if she could follow orders, work as part of a team, be more than an unstoppable force of destruction. When do we leave? Adora asked. Captain Syndulla stood, decision made. I'll fly her there personally. Ghost is fast enough to get us in and out before the Empire knows what happened. She glanced at Adora. Assuming you can handle yourself without the light show this time. Adora felt the sword pulse against her palm, its power diminished but recovering. The transformation had cost her more here than on Etheria. The Force's interference created resistance she was still learning to navigate. But she'd fought without She-Ra before. She'd been trained by the Horde to be deadly, even without magic. I can handle it, she said. What she didn't say. She wasn't sure she could handle watching more people die for freedom while she held back, rationing power, because this galaxy made her pay a higher price for being herself. As the briefing dissolved, Leia caught Adora's arm. Up close, the princess was younger than Adora had realized, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd watched her entire world burn. I know what it's like, Leia said quietly. To be the one everyone looks at when they need miracles. Just remember, you don't have to be She-Ra all the time. Sometimes Adora is enough. Adora wanted to believe that. She really did. But the last time she'd been just Adora, just herself without the power, Katra had nearly died. Etheria had nearly fallen. She'd learned the hard way that who she was without the sword wasn't enough to protect the people she loved. And she'd just met these rebels, but she already knew. She'd die before she let the Empire take them the way Horde Prime had taken so many of her friends. Thanks, she said instead, managing a smile. I'll remember that. Captain Syndulla was already heading for the hangar. Adora followed, the sword heavy against her back, and tried not to think about how much this felt like walking into another war she barely understood. Behind them, Mon Mothma watched through the viewport as Adora disappeared into the corridor. She's going to burn herself out, the rebel leader said softly. Leia stood beside her, arms crossed. Yes, but she'll save a lot of lives before she does. That's what I'm afraid of, Mon Mothma replied. The medical frigate Redemption drifted in the shadow of Yavin 4's second moon, its holds full of wounded rebels from a disastrous engagement near Beston. Inside its cramped operating theaters, doctors worked with desperate efficiency, triaging injuries that Bacta tanks couldn't heal fast enough. Adora walked through the corridors and felt the weight of suffering press against her like a physical thing. She'd returned from the Ferrex raid 6 hours ago. Successful, clean, exactly the kind of operation that proved she could work with rebel teams without excessive force. Captain Syndulla had even smiled when they jumped to hyperspace, 3 stolen Imperial supply crates secured in Ghost's hold. But now this, a complication to her convenient integration. Adora, the medical coordinator, a Celestin named Dr. Nelprin, looked like he hadn't slept in days. Captain Syndulla said you might be able to help, that you have healing abilities. Through an observation window, Adora could see a human pilot, couldn't have been older than 19, lying on a surgical table. Burns covered half his body, the kind Bacta could treat eventually, but the internal damage was worse. Shrapnel had punctured his lungs, and even with the medical droid's best efforts, his breathing was becoming labored. He was flying escort for a supply convoy, Dr. Nelprin explained, exhaustion making his voice flat. TIE interceptor got through our screen. The kid managed to eject, but... He gestured helplessly at the monitor, showing vital signs trending downward. We don't have the facilities. We're patching people together with spare parts and hope. Adora pressed her hand against the observation window, feeling the sword respond to her intention. The healing magic was there, ready, but weaker than it should be. She'd used so much power driving off the Star Destroyer, and the transformation on Ferrex had cost more than she'd expected. The Force's interference meant every use of her abilities drained her faster, took longer to recover. But this pilot was dying, right now, while she stood here calculating the cost. Get me in there, Adora said. The operating theater fell silent when she entered. The medical droids paused, sensors unable to categorize the energy beginning to emanate from the sword of protection. Adora placed her hands on the pilot's chest, feeling the damage beneath her palms, torn tissue, failing organs, a body giving up its fight. She closed her eyes and let the healing magic flow. On Etheria, this would have been effortless. She'd healed dozens of people during the war against Horde Prime, knitting broken bones and closing wounds with barely a thought. But here, the magic had to fight through the Force's omnipresent energy, translating her intent into something this universe could accept. Instead of healing through Etheria's life force network, she had to work through midi-chlorians, the microscopic organisms that somehow connected all living things. It was like learning to write with her non-dominant hand. Possible but exhausting. Golden light pulsed from her palms, sinking into the pilot's body. She felt his lungs reinflate, the shrapnel wounds close, burnt tissue regenerate cell by painful cell. His heartbeat strengthened under her touch, and color returned to his face. But the cost was immediate. Adora's vision swam, and she staggered as the healing completed. Dr. Nelprin caught her before she fell, and she heard the monitors stabilize with a steady beep that meant life continued. Impossible, breathed one of the medical droids. Cellular regeneration at impossible speeds. No scarring. He's going to be fine. There are 17 more critical patients, Dr. Nelprin said quietly, looking at Adora with desperate hope. Can you? Adora looked down the corridor where other operating rooms held other dying rebels, pilots who'd flown missions, ground troops who'd fought hopeless battles, technicians caught in Imperial bombardments. All of them here because they believed freedom was worth bleeding for. The sword pulsed weakly. She could feel its reserves depleting, her own exhaustion mounting. If she pushed too hard, she'd burn out completely. Might take days to recover full strength. Days during which more people would die. Show me, Adora said. For the next 4 hours, she moved from patient to patient, healing what Bacta tanks couldn't reach and surgical droids couldn't repair. A Twi'lek with nerve damage that would have left her paralyzed. A Bothan whose internal organs had been crushed in an explosion. A human teenager who'd lost an arm to a lightsaber. She couldn't regrow the limb, but she could stop the infection spreading from the cauterized stump. Each healing cost more than the last. Each time she drew on the sword's power, the resistance from the Force grew stronger. As if this galaxy itself was questioning whether her magic should exist here. By the 17th patient, Adora could barely stand. The world tilted sideways, and she had to brace herself against the surgical table to stay upright. The pilot before her, an older man with a face scarred by decades of fighting, watched her with knowing eyes. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "I've lived a full life, kid. You're killing yourself doing this." "I can save you," Adora insisted, hands already glowing with fading golden light. "I just need to choose." Mon Mothma's voice cut through her determination. The rebel leader stood in the doorway, having witnessed the last 3 healings. "You can save him now and be useless for days while you recover, or you can stop, rest, and be ready when the next crisis comes." "Because there will be a next crisis. There always is." Adora looked down at the pilot, at his accepting expression, at the monitor showing a slow decline that would take hours. Enough time for transport to a better facility. Enough time for conventional medicine to work its slower miracles. But he might die anyway. The statistics weren't good. "Save your strength, She-Ra," the pilot said, using her title for the first time. "Some of us old soldiers know when it's our time. Just promise me you'll be there to heal the young ones. They've got more war left to fight." Adora felt tears burning her eyes. This was the choice Shadow Weaver had trained her never to make, accepting that she couldn't save everyone, that sometimes strategic withdrawal was necessary. But the Horde's strategy had been about conquest, not compassion. This was different. This was acknowledging her own limits so she could help more people in the long run. It still felt like failure. "I promise," she whispered, stepping back from the surgical table. Her legs nearly gave out, and Dr. Nelprin had to support her weight. Mon Mothma guided her toward the exit, one hand on her shoulder. "You saved 16 lives today that would have been lost. That's not nothing, Adora. That's everything to their families." "It's not enough," Adora said through exhaustion. "It's never enough." "No," Mon Mothma agreed softly. "It never is. That's what makes us different from the Empire. We care that it's not enough." As Adora collapsed into a recovery bed, medical droids fussing over her depleted energy readings, she heard the pilot's monitor steady behind her. Conventional medicine working just fast enough. This time, the Imperial defector arrived 3 days later on a stolen Lambda-class shuttle, broadcasting rebel codes that checked out but felt wrong to everyone who'd survived this long by trusting their instincts. Adora watched from Home One's hangar as the shuttle settled onto its landing struts, and something in her chest tightened with recognition she couldn't quite name. The pilot who emerged was young, maybe 25, with the rigid posture of someone trained by the Empire, but the haunted eyes of someone who'd seen what they were trained to do. His uniform was Imperial Navy, officer rank, stripped of insignia in a hurried escape. He descended the ramp with hands raised, clearly unarmed, clearly terrified. "I have intelligence," he said immediately to the security team that surrounded him, weapons drawn. "Troop movements, supply routes, tactical data on the sector fleet. I want to help. I want to make up for..." His voice cracked. "For what I've done." Adora felt her stomach drop. She'd heard these exact words before. From herself at 15, when she'd first realized the Horde was wrong. From dozens of Horde soldiers she'd convinced to defect during the rebellion. The desperate need to atone, to prove you weren't the monster you'd been trained to become. But she'd also seen what happened when defectors were trusted too quickly. When people assumed redemption was simple as changing sides. The security team escorted him to interrogation, and Etheria found herself following without conscious decision. Captain Syndulla noticed, falling into step beside her. "You know that look," the Twi'lek said. It wasn't a question. "I was raised by the people I fought against," Etheria replied quietly. "I was their perfect soldier until I wasn't. So yeah, I know what he's feeling right now." The interrogation room was small and cold, designed to be uncomfortable. Mon Mothma and General Dodonna were already there, watching through one-way glass as a Bothan intelligence officer questioned the defector. His name was Lieutenant Jaren Cross, and his story checked out. Imperial Naval Academy graduate, assigned to the Vindicator, witnessed an orbital bombardment of a civilian settlement that refused to surrender. "They didn't even have weapons," Cross said, voice hollow. "Just farmers who wanted to be left alone. And we turned their village to glass because it would send a message to the sector." His hands shook on the table. "I can't be part of that anymore." "I won't." "It could be a trap," Dodonna said, watching with professional suspicion. "The Empire's used false defectors before. Feed us intelligence that leads into ambushes." "His story is consistent," the Bothan interrogator reported through the comm. "Physiological stress indicators suggest genuine trauma, but that could be training." Mon Mothma turned to Etheria. "You've been quiet. What do you think?" Etheria watched Cross through the glass, seeing herself in every nervous gesture. "I think he's telling the truth. I think he genuinely wants to help." She paused, then added, "I also think that's not enough." Mon Mothma's eyebrow rose slightly. "Explain." "Wanting to be good doesn't erase what you've done," Etheria said, each word costing her something. "I helped the Horde conquer villages. I led missions that destroyed people's lives. When I defected, I thought switching sides made me a hero automatically." She touched the sword's hilt, drawing comfort from its presence. "But redemption isn't a switch you flip. It's something you earn through years of proving you've changed, and some people never get there." Through the glass, Cross was describing Imperial fleet movements with the precision of someone who'd memorized tactical data. Useful information, potentially life-saving intelligence. "So what do you recommend?" Dodonna asked. "We simply reject his help. Let valuable intelligence slip through our fingers because of philosophical concerns about redemption." "No," Etheria said. "We use him. Carefully. We verify everything he tells us through independent sources. We watch him constantly. And we never, ever let him forget that trust is earned, not given." She met Mon Mothma's eyes. "That's what the rebellion gave me. A chance to prove I was serious. But they were right to make me prove it." Captain Syndulla made a thoughtful noise. "She has a point. We can leverage his intelligence without giving him access to critical systems, standard defector protocol." "I want to talk to him," Etheria said suddenly. "Alone, just for a few minutes." Mon Mothma studied her, then nodded. 5 minutes. Security will be watching." The interrogation room felt smaller from inside. Cross looked up as Etheria entered, and she saw the moment recognition flickered across his face. Not of her specifically, but of what she represented. Someone who'd made the same choice. "You were Horde," he said immediately. Not a question. "How did you know?" Etheria sat across from him, deliberately casual. "The way you carry yourself. Military training that's trying not to look like military training." Cross managed a weak smile. "And the way you've been watching me like you're seeing yourself. We recognize our own, I guess." Etheria leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Then you know what I'm about to say. Wanting to help isn't enough. Feeling guilty isn't enough. The Empire trained us to be efficient, to follow orders, to see people as acceptable casualties. She held his gaze. You're going to have moments where that training kicks in, where you default to imperial thinking without realizing it. And when that happens, people will die if you're in a position of trust. Cross's face went pale. I would never. Not intentionally, Adora interrupted. But our instincts are imperial. Our training is imperial. Unlearning that takes time and constant awareness. She softened slightly. I'm not saying you can't redeem yourself. I'm saying it's harder than you think, and the rebellion deserves people who understand that. So what do I do? Cross asked, genuine desperation in his voice. How do I prove I've changed? Adora thought of Glimmer trusting her despite everything. Bao accepting her when she had every reason to run. Katra's years-long journey from enemy to ally to something more. The countless small moments of choosing differently until the choice became who she was. You keep choosing, she said simply. Every day, every mission, every moment when Imperial training tells you one thing and your conscience tells you another. She stood, preparing to leave. And eventually, the choosing becomes automatic. Eventually, you won't have to think about being good. You'll just be it. As she left the interrogation room, Adora heard Cross call after her. Thank you for understanding. She didn't respond, because understanding wasn't the same as forgiveness, and both of them had work to do before they earned that from anyone, including themselves. Outside, Mon Mothma was waiting. That was compassionate and practical, a rare combination. I learned from the best, Adora said, thinking of Angela's patient wisdom and Mara's fierce pragmatism. Both the compassion and the practicality. We'll verify his intelligence and assign him limited duties, Mon Mothma decided. If he proves reliable, he can earn more trust. If not, she didn't need to finish. Adora nodded, watching through the glass as Cross sat alone with his thoughts. She recognized that isolation, the space between who you were and who you wanted to become. It was the loneliest place in any galaxy, but it was also where redemption began, if you were strong enough to walk through it. The Executor's meditation chamber was darkness absolute, save for the faint lights of the life support systems that kept Darth Vader alive. He knelt in the center of the room, reaching through the Force with methodical precision, searching for the anomaly that had disrupted his awareness 2 weeks prior. There, not a presence in the Force, but an absence shaped like power. Something that moved through the galaxy, leaving ripples in the Force itself without being part of its flow, like a stone cutting through water, present but foreign, creating disturbance through sheer incompatibility. The reports from Captain Calrin had been illuminating. A warrior who fought in vacuum without a spacecraft, who deflected turbo-laser fire with a blade, who radiated energy completely unknown to Imperial science. The sensor data was impossible, which meant it was either false or more significant than any threat the rebellion had fielded before. Vader stood, his meditation concluded. The Emperor would want this anomaly eliminated or captured. Palpatine's hunger for unusual power was insatiable, and something that existed outside the Force would fascinate and threaten him in equal measure. But Vader's interest was different. He remembered being Anakin, remembered the prophecy of the Chosen One who would bring balance to the Force. He'd failed that destiny, become something else. But this warrior, this She-Ra, as the reports named her, represented genuine imbalance. Power without the Force's duality, strength without light or dark. Perhaps understanding her would reveal whether balance was truly his destiny or merely another lie from the Jedi. Admiral Piet, Vader spoke into the ship's comm, his respirator marking each syllable with mechanical rhythm. Set course for the Yavin system, maximum speed. We have rebels to hunt. On Yavin 4, Adora woke from a nightmare of Horde Prime's cold voice, and the moment reality had torn apart. The medical bay's dim lighting oriented her. She was on Home 1, not on Etheria, not dying in the space between universes. She was alive. She was needed. And according to the tactical alert flashing on her datapad, the Empire was coming. Adora dressed quickly, strapping the sword of protection across her back. The weapon's power had recovered somewhat over the past days, but the exhaustion from healing 17 patients still lingered. She'd pushed too hard too fast, and her body was paying the price of adapting to this galaxy's different rules. The bridge was organized chaos when she arrived. Mon Mothma stood at the center, projecting calm authority while officers shouted updates from every station. "The Executor has dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge," reported the sensor operator, voice tight with barely controlled fear. "Superstar Destroyer, Executor class, Vader's flagship." Adora had learned enough about the Empire to understand what that meant. Darth Vader, the Emperor's right hand, fallen Jedi turned Sith Lord, the dark shadow that terrified even Imperial officers. And he was here. For her, she knew it with the same certainty she'd felt when Horde Prime first turned his attention toward Etheria. "Begin evacuation protocols," Mon Mothma ordered. "All non-combat personnel to the transports. Combat ships prepare for—" "Wait." Adora stepped forward, and every head turned. "He's here because of me, because of what I did to the Relentless. If you run, he'll chase you across the galaxy." She met Mon Mothma's eyes, seeing the calculations happening behind them. "Let me talk to him." "Talk?" General Dodonna looked at her like she'd suggested negotiating with a black hole. "Vader doesn't talk. He kills, he captures, he destroys. You can't reason with a Sith Lord." "I fought people everyone said were unreasonable before," Adora replied, thinking of Katra's years of rage and hurt, of Shadow Weaver's manipulation, of Horde Prime's absolute certainty. Sometimes the only way to end a cycle of violence is to offer something different. Captain Syndulla moved to stand beside her. "She has a point. Vader's here for her, not the base. If she goes out to meet him, draws him away from Yavin 4, we could evacuate safely while they're talking. Or he kills her instantly, and we lose our most powerful asset," Dodonna countered. "I'm not an asset," Adora said quietly but firmly. "I'm a person making a choice, and I choose to face the threat I created instead of letting other people die for me." Mon Mothma studied her for a long moment. In the rebel leader's expression, Adora saw a woman weighing one life against thousands, personal ethics against strategic necessity. It was the kind of choice that shaped leaders and broke them in equal measure. "If you go," Mon Mothma said finally, "you go in a ship with a pilot who can extract you if things go wrong. No solo heroics." "I'll take her," Captain Syndulla volunteered immediately. "Ghost is fast enough to run if we need to." "When we need to," Dodonna corrected grimly. 20 minutes later, Ghost broke atmosphere, climbing toward where the Executor hung in orbit like a monument to Imperial power. The Superstar Destroyer was enormous, 19 kilometers of weapons, armor, and the cold efficiency of military might. Beside it, Ghost was an insect facing a mountain. "They're hailing us," Syndulla reported. "Audio only. It's him." Adora took a breath and opened the channel. "This is Adora. I'm the one you're looking for. The rebellion had nothing to do with me being here. If you want answers, I'll meet you. Face to face, alone." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then a voice emerged from the speakers, mechanical, deep, carrying the weight of tragedies no amount of technology could disguise. "You are brave," Darth Vader said. "Or foolish, perhaps both." Another pause, filled with the rhythm of artificial breathing. "Very well. Hangar Bay 7. Come alone, or my ships will destroy every rebel vessel in this system." The transmission cut. Syndulla looked at Adora with open concern. "You know this is a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Adora replied, checking the sword one final time. "But it's also a chance. If I can make him see me as a person instead of a threat." She trailed off, not sure how to finish that thought. "I've talked down people who wanted me dead before." "None of them were Sith Lords," Syndulla pointed out. "No," Adora agreed. "But all of them were people who'd been hurt, who'd been turned into weapons by systems they didn't create." She thought of Katra's pain, Shadow Weaver's manipulation, even her own years of misdirected loyalty. Maybe Vader's not so different. As Ghost approached the Executor's massive hangar bay, Adora felt the Force pressing against her awareness, not hostile yet, but watchful, curious. This galaxy's energy recognized she didn't belong, but it was learning her presence, categorizing the impossible. And somewhere in that massive ship, Darth Vader waited to meet the warrior who existed outside everything he understood about power. Adora stood, the sword of protection in her hand, and prepared to face the darkness that had terrified 2 generations of rebels. She'd faced darkness before. She'd been darkness before. This time she'd try to find the light hidden underneath. Hangar Bay 7 was a cathedral of imperial efficiency, vast, cold, and filled with the geometric precision of TIE fighters arranged in perfect rows. Adora descended Ghost's ramp alone, the sword of protection held loosely at her side, not raised but ready. Behind her, she felt Captain Syndulla's worry through the ship's open cockpit, but the Twi'lek pilot kept her word and stayed aboard. Darth Vader stood in the center of the hangar, a figure carved from darkness and nightmare. His black armor reflected the harsh overhead lighting, and his cape fell around him like shadows given weight. But what struck Adora most was the sound, the mechanical breathing that marked each moment, a rhythm of life sustained through technology and will. She'd heard that sound before. In Horde Prime's throne room, where life support systems maintained the bodies he'd discarded. In the Fright Zone's medical bays, where the Horde kept soldiers functional past their breaking points. This was what happened when you couldn't let go, when you refused to die, even though everything natural said you should. "You are unexpected." Vader's voice resonated through his mask, each word deliberate. He began to circle her slowly, studying. "The Force shows me a void where you stand, not absence, not death, simply incompatibility, as if the universe itself rejects your existence here." "I get that a lot lately," Adora replied, turning to keep him in view. "I'm not from this galaxy. I didn't choose to come here. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to stand by while an empire hurts people. I've seen what empires do." "Have you?" Vader stopped, tilting his head slightly. Through the Force, he reached toward her, not attacking, but analyzing. His consciousness brushed against the edge of her presence and recoiled, like touching fire that shouldn't burn. "You speak of empires as if you fought one, yet you appear young, untested by true war." "I'm 24, Adora said quietly. "I've been a soldier since I was 6. I was raised by the Horde, an empire that conquered my world piece by piece. They trained me to lead their armies, to see people as territories to be claimed." She met his masked gaze steadily. "I believed them, until I learned they were wrong, until I learned that strength means protecting people, not controlling them." Something shifted in Vader's posture, not visible, but present, a tensing that suggested she'd touched something he'd thought buried. "You were a servant of darkness who found the light," he said, and there was something in his mechanical voice that might have been bitter recognition. "How noble, how fortunate for you that redemption was possible." "It wasn't fortune," Adora countered. "It was choice. Every day, every moment, choosing to be different than what I was trained to be." She raised the sword slightly. This weapon chose me because I could change, because I proved that who you are isn't who you have to stay. Then you are naive. Vader's hand moved, and Etheria felt reality shift. The force, that pervasive energy she'd been learning to sense, suddenly focused with crushing intensity. An invisible grip closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Power is not a choice, it is a burden, a necessity, and those with true strength must use it, regardless of sentiment. Etheria couldn't breathe, but she'd fought without air before. She raised the sword of protection, and golden light exploded outward. The force choke shattered like glass, and she dropped back to her feet, gasping. The magic and the force had collided, and for a moment, neither knew what to do with the other. "You're right," Etheria said when she could speak, voice rough. "Power is a burden, but you don't have to use it the way the Empire taught you. You don't have to be what they made you." Vader's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, red blade casting bloody light across his armor. "I am what I chose to become. Do not presume to know my path." He attacked. The crimson blade came down in a perfect arc, and Etheria brought the sword up to meet it. The weapons collided, and reality screamed. Lightsaber plasma met enchanted metal powered by ancient magic, and the resulting energy discharge sent shockwaves across the hangar. TIE fighters rocked on their landing struts, and warning klaxons began to wail. Vader pressed the attack with mechanical precision. Form V. Gem. So variant, she recognized somehow through the sword's knowledge. Each strike was meant to overpower, to dominate through superior strength. But Etheria had sparred with Katra's speed, trained against Scorpia's raw power, faced Horde Prime's overwhelming force. She knew how to fight people stronger than her. She gave ground, let him think he was winning, then slipped inside his guard and slammed her shoulder into his chest. The impact should have been like hitting a wall, but She-Ra's strength was already manifesting even without full transformation. Vader staggered back, surprise evident in his sudden defensive posture. "You fight well," he acknowledged, recovering instantly. "But technique alone will not save you from the dark side's power." He raised his hand, and the Force itself became a weapon. Debris from around the hangar, tools, equipment, even a small maintenance droid, flew toward Etheria like shrapnel. She spun the sword in a defensive pattern, deflecting what she could, but a piece of metal caught her shoulder, and she felt blood begin to flow. The pain focused her, clarified her purpose. "For the honor of Grey Skull!" The transformation took her in a heartbeat. Golden light consumed Etheria's form, and She-Ra stood in her place, 8 feet of power and purpose, the sword blazing like a star. The wound on her shoulder sealed itself, and when she looked at Vader now, she saw not just a Sith Lord, but a man encased in machinery, sustained by pain, powered by loss he'd never processed. "I see," Vader said quietly, and his lightsaber lowered slightly. "You are something beyond Force sensitive, beyond what the Jedi or Sith have encountered. You are other. I'm someone who learned that power without compassion is just tyranny," She-Ra replied, her voice resonant with magic. "You can be more than what the Empire made you. You can choose differently. Even now, even after everything." For a moment, just one moment, Vader's lightsaber wavered. Through the Force, She-Ra felt something she hadn't expected: doubt. Not in his strength or his purpose, but in the absolute certainty that had sustained him for decades. She'd cracked something, exposed a wound he'd thought cauterized. Then the moment passed, and Vader's blade rose again. "You understand nothing of what I have done, what I must continue to do." His voice carried finality now. "But you have proven yourself worthy of study. The Emperor will want to meet you, to understand what you represent." I'm not going anywhere with you, She-Ra said firmly. You assume you have a choice. Vader gestured, and the hangar bay's massive doors began to close, sealing off Ghost's escape route. Throughout the Executor, She-Ra felt systems activating, tractor beams, containment fields, the full resources of an empire focusing on capturing something it couldn't understand. She could fight, break through the bay doors, carry Ghost back to Yavin 4 through sheer force. But that would mean more combat, more Imperial deaths, more violence in a galaxy already drowning in it. Or she could offer something different. Let the rebels evacuate Yavin 4, She-Ra said. Completely. Every ship, every person. Give them 6 hours head start. She lowered the sword slightly. Do that, and I'll come with you voluntarily. Let your Emperor study me. Try to understand what I am, but the rebellion gets to live. Vader was silent for a long moment, his breathing the only sound in the hangar. You would trade yourself for them? You barely know these people. I know what it means to fight for freedom, She-Ra replied. I know what it costs, and I know that sometimes the best way to protect people is to take their place. She thought of Angela, sacrificing herself in the collapsing portal, of Mara, staying behind on Horde Prime's ship, of all the small and large ways people she'd loved had chosen others' lives over their own. This was her turn, her choice, her burden to carry. The Emperor will be intrigued. Vader deactivated his lightsaber. Decision made. You have 6 hours. Then I will come for you, whether the rebels have evacuated or not. And if you resist, I will destroy every ship that remains. I won't resist, She-Ra promised, releasing her transformation. Adora stood once more, exhausted but steady. I keep my word. As Ghost lifted off, carrying her back to Yavin 4, Adora watched the Executor through the viewport. Somewhere aboard that massive vessel, Darth Vader stood in darkness, contemplating the warrior who'd offered herself as a prisoner rather than let more people die. She'd cracked something in him. She'd seen it. Now she just had to survive long enough to widen that crack into something that might, someday, become light. The evacuation of Yavin 4 was controlled chaos, ships launching in waves, personnel moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd run from the Empire too many times to count. Adora stood in Home One's hangar bay, watching transports carry families, supplies, hope itself away from the jungle moon that had briefly been sanctuary. Mon Mothma approached, her composed exterior cracking enough to show genuine distress. You don't have to do this. We can fight. We've escaped impossible situations before. At what cost? Adora asked quietly. She'd spent the past 2 hours helping load supplies, saying goodbye to pilots she'd flown with, healing one last injured soldier who'd been too stubborn to evacuate earlier. How many ships would you lose fighting the Executor? How many pilots? How many people who could have lived to fight another day? How many people will we lose because you're not here to protect them? Princess Leia stood beside Mon Mothma, her expression fierce despite the moisture in her eyes. You've been with us less than a month, and you've already changed what's possible. Shown us that the Empire can be beaten, given people hope that someone will save them, Adora interrupted gently. I know. I've been that symbol before. She thought of Etheria's people looking to She-Ra, expecting miracles, needing her to be perfect and powerful and always enough. But symbols can become prisons. People need to learn they can save themselves. Captain Syndulla approached with Ghost's boarding ramp extended. 5 hours, 42 minutes left. Most of the fleet's away. But we have stragglers. Medical personnel refusing to abandon patients. Technicians trying to save equipment. She looked at Adora with something like understanding. You're really doing this? I have to, Adora said simply. She turned to Mon Mothma, choosing her words carefully. I've spent my whole life being pointed at problems like a weapon. Let me do this differently. Let me go to the Emperor as a person making a choice, not a soldier following orders. Maybe that will matter. Maybe it won't. But at least it'll be my decision. And if the Emperor tries to corrupt you, Mon Mothma asked, turn you into an Imperial asset? Use your power against everything you believe in? Adora touched the sword of protection, feeling its steady pulse of loyal magic. Then he'll learn the same lesson Horde Prime learned. Some people can't be controlled. Some things are worth dying for. She paused, then added quietly, but I'm really hoping it doesn't come to that. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Lieutenant Cross, the Imperial defector, sought her out, stammering gratitude for giving him a chance. Blue 7, the pilot she'd saved during her first battle, pressed a rebel insignia into her hand. Don't forget which side you're on, he said gruffly. As if she could forget. As if anything about this would be forgettable. When Vader's shuttle descended toward the evacuation site, the rebel presence had been reduced to a single transport awaiting the last stragglers. Adora stood alone in the clearing, the sword of protection across her back, watching the black craft settle onto landing struts with imperial precision. The Dark Lord emerged flanked by stormtroopers, but his attention fixed immediately on Adora. You kept your word, unexpected for a rebel. I'm not a rebel, Adora replied. I'm someone who fights for freedom. There's a difference. The Emperor will enjoy debating philosophy with you, Vader said, something that might have been dark amusement in his mechanical voice. Come, your sacrifice buys the Alliance time, but time is all they've purchased. The Empire's victory is inevitable. We'll see, Adora said quietly, and walked toward the shuttle. As they ascended toward the Executor, she looked down at Yavin 4's Emerald Jungle one last time. The rebellion would regroup, find a new base, continue their impossible fight. And she'd do what she'd always done. Face the darkness head-on and hope her light was bright enough to matter. The journey to Coruscant took 3 days of hyperspace travel, during which Adora was confined to quarters that were luxurious by prison standards, but unmistakably a cell. Vader visited twice, not to interrogate, but to observe, as if studying an alien species. Their conversations were strange, circular things where they debated the nature of power while carefully avoiding anything personal. But in those conversations, Adora learned something crucial. Vader wasn't entirely loyal to the Emperor. There were cracks in his certainty, moments where he questioned whether the Empire's order was worth its brutality. She filed that information away, knowing it might matter someday. The Imperial Palace on Coruscant was a monument to excess disguised as authority, soaring architecture designed to make individuals feel insignificant. Guards at every corner, the overwhelming presence of the dark side pooling like toxic water in its lowest chambers. Adora felt the Force's corruption the moment she entered, recognizing the familiar taint of concentrated evil. She'd felt it in Horde Prime's sanctum, in Shadow Weaver's chambers, in every place where power justified itself through cruelty. Emperor Palpatine sat on his throne at the chamber's heart, and despite expecting horror, Adora still wasn't prepared. The man was ancient beyond reckoning, his face a map of malevolence, his eyes burning with yellow intensity. But worse than his appearance was his presence, the dark side so concentrated in him that reality itself seemed to bend toward his will. Ah, Palpatine said, voice deceptively pleasant. The anomaly, the power that exists outside the Force. I have been most eager to meet you, young warrior. Adora stood straight, refusing to be intimidated, despite every instinct screaming to run. I'm here because I chose to trade myself for the rebellion's safety, not because I'm interested in whatever you want from me. Such spirit, Palpatine laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking. Lord Vader, You've brought me something truly unique. A warrior raised by tyrants who believes she's transcended her training. Fascinating. His gaze fixed on Etheria, and she felt him trying to reach into her mind. But let us see what you truly are beneath the noble words. The mental assault was immediate and overwhelming. Palpatine's consciousness crashed against Etheria's mind like a tidal wave, seeking weaknesses, hunting for corruption, looking for the darkness that existed in every being with power. She felt him rifling through her memories, the Horde's indoctrination, the moments she'd hurt people while believing she was helping, the times she'd been selfish or cruel or wrong. But he also found what the Horde had never understood: genuine love. Glimmer's friendship, Bao's loyalty, Katra's redemption, Angela's sacrifice. All the moments where Etheria had learned that connection was stronger than control, that vulnerability was braver than invincibility. Palpatine withdrew with a hiss of frustration. Impossible. Your mind is protected, not by force training or mental discipline, but by something external. That weapon. The sword of protection pulsed, and Etheria felt its consciousness wrap around her thoughts like a shield. The first one's magic was older than the Sith, and it answered to no dark side compulsion. You can't control me, Etheria said, breathing hard from the mental battle. I didn't survive Horde Prime's hive mind just to fall to yours. Palpatine's expression shifted from curiosity to cold calculation. Then you are useless to me as an asset, but perhaps your power can be studied, dissected, used to create weapons that combine your magic with the Force's might. He gestured, and Etheria felt the room's energy shift as hidden systems activated. Contain her. The scientists will determine what makes her function. Vader stepped forward, lightsaber igniting, but not aimed at Etheria, at the Emperor. No, the Dark Lord said, his voice carrying decades of suppressed rebellion. I have served you faithfully, my master, crushed the Jedi, built your empire. But I will not deliver someone to be vivisected when they offered themselves honorably. The temperature in the throne room dropped to freezing. You dare defy me, Lord Vader? Have you forgotten the power I wield over your very existence? I have forgotten nothing, Vader replied, but I remember who I was before you twisted me into this. His red blade didn't waver. And I remember that even the dark side requires something worth fighting for. What we've built is order through terror. Perhaps it's time to consider whether order through strength might serve better. Palpatine's laughter was genuine now, delighted and terrible. Oh, my apprentice, you've been corrupted by this anomaly. How predictable, how disappointing. He raised his hands, and Force lightning erupted, not at Vader, but at Etheria. The electricity should have been agony, should have shut down her nervous system instantly. But the sword blazed, and She-Ra's transformation took her in a heartbeat. The lightning struck her raised blade and grounded harmlessly, converted from pain into light by magic that predated the Sith's darkest techniques. You can't hurt me with the dark side, She-Ra said, her voice resonant with power. And you can't control me with fear. I've faced those weapons before. I've overcome them before. Whatever you thought I was, whatever you plan to do with me, it won't work. Palpatine's expression shifted to genuine surprise for the first time. Then, remarkably, he smiled. Fascinating. You truly are beyond my reach, which makes you either the most dangerous being in the galaxy. He settled back onto his throne, calculations visible behind his yellow eyes. Or the most valuable ally I could never recruit. I'm neither, She-Ra replied. I'm just someone trying to help people. And I'm asking you, both of you, to consider whether power used to control is worth the cost it demands from your own souls. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Vader deactivated his lightsaber. Let her go, the Dark Lord said, She came here voluntarily. She's kept her word. The rebels have evacuated. There's no tactical advantage to holding her, and attempting to weaponize her will likely fail catastrophically." He turned to face Palpatine directly. "And perhaps, my master, we should consider what her existence means. Power outside the Force, strength that answers to neither light nor dark. If such things are possible, our assumptions about inevitable Imperial victory may require reconsideration." Palpatine studied them both, his corrupted apprentice and the impossible warrior, and made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. "Go, return to your rebellion. Tell them that the Emperor can show mercy when it serves his interests." His smile turned sharp. "But know this, you've introduced chaos into a galaxy I've spent decades ordering. The consequences will be your responsibility." As She-Ra walked from the throne room, Vader at her side ensuring safe passage, she felt the weight of what had just happened. She'd cracked something in Vader, made him question, made him choose differently, even briefly, than the Empire demanded. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't even alliance, but it was possibility. And in a galaxy drowning in darkness, possibility was its own kind of light. Ghost was waiting at the Imperial Palace's landing platform, Captain Syndulla having refused to leave Coruscant's orbit without her passenger. As Adora boarded, exhausted, transformed back to human, barely able to stand, she felt Vader's presence behind her one last time. "You were wrong," the Dark Lord said quietly. "I cannot change. The path I've walked has gone too far to turn back." "Maybe," Adora replied, turning to meet his masked gaze. "Or maybe you just haven't met the right reason to try yet. I was wrong about a lot of things before I learned to be better." She touched the sword one last time, drawing comfort from its presence. The choice is always there, even when you think it isn't, even when everything says it's too late. The choice is there. As Ghost jumped to hyperspace, leaving Coruscant and its corruption behind, Adora collapsed into the co-pilot seat and allowed herself to finally break down. She'd survived. The rebellion had survived. And somewhere in the Imperial Palace, Darth Vader stood in his meditation chamber and contemplated the impossible notion that redemption might still be possible. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were enough. 3 months after Adora's return, the rebellion had established a new base on Hoth's frozen plains. She stood in the command center, no longer the mysterious anomaly, but an integrated part of the Alliance's leadership. Mon Mothma had given her command of special operations, missions where impossible odds required impossible solutions. But something had changed in the Empire, too. Intelligence reported that Vader's pursuit of rebel cells had become less absolute. He still struck with devastating efficiency, but there were moments, small, barely noticeable moments, where Imperial forces could have pressed advantage and didn't, where surrender was accepted instead of punished with execution. Maybe she truly cracked something in him. Maybe it was wishful thinking. Time would tell. The Sword of Protection had adapted to this galaxy, learning to harmonize with the Force instead of fighting it. Adora's transformations came easier now, cost less, lasted longer. She was becoming part of this universe rather than a foreign presence it rejected. But more importantly, she'd learned to be Adora without constantly becoming She-Ra. The rebellion didn't need an invincible symbol. They needed a leader who understood that strength meant lifting others, not carrying them. Princess Leia had taught her that. Mon Mothma had shown her. Captain Syndulla had demonstrated it through every mission. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer reported. "It's encrypted. Priority channel. It's from an Imperial frequency." The message was audio only, just 3 sentences in Vader's unmistakable mechanical voice. "You were right about choices. about paths not being fixed. Thank you for that, whether it matters or not. Adora smiled despite herself. It mattered. Everything mattered. Every small act of choosing differently, of questioning certainty, of reaching for light instead of settling for darkness. The war against the Empire would continue. More battles would be fought. More lives would be lost. But she'd brought something to this galaxy that even the Force hadn't fully understood. The certainty that power without compassion was worthless, that redemption was always possible, and that sometimes the strongest thing a warrior could do was offer mercy instead of victory. She-Ra had come to the Star Wars galaxy as an accident, but she would remain as a choice, to fight for freedom, to believe in people's potential for growth, and to prove that hope backed by strength could challenge even the mightiest empires. The rebellion had found its princess of power, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. May the Force be with you. More stories await.